Thank you very much.
Nigel.
Thank you, Danny, and welcome everyone tonight. Thanks so much for giving up your Tuesday evening. Now, just to introduce myself a little bit, I've been a Toastmaster for a little under 3 years now, but by day, I'm actually a project manager. And project management, of course, is all about getting stuff done. And it's getting stuff done with people to try and get the best out of them to get the end result that you want. Now, when I first went into project management back in the automotive industry, way last century, it was a different world. And it was all about command and control. It was all about he who shouts loudest gets stuff done. And I learned the hard way. Those were my formative years. And it was only as I retrained to be a coach reasonably recently, I realized there's a trick to all of this. And first and foremost, it's about relationships. So what I want to share with you this evening is my journey of understanding of DISC personality profiling. So for anyone out there that's done something reasonably similar with perhaps Myers-Briggs or SDI, Strength Deployment Index, or maybe even Belbin and the team stuff, a lot of this is pretty similar. So I hope you're going to enjoy it, and let's make a start. And before we do, I really just want to touch on a few pieces of housekeeping. And the one thing I want to do this evening is make this session really interactive. We'll be going for about an hour or so, possibly 75 minutes, possibly a bit longer if there's questions, I don't mind. But if you've got a phone, a tablet, a spare web browser on your laptop, head over to menti.com, that's MENTI.com, and bang in the code 74729579, because I want to make this really interactive and hopefully a bit of fun as well. Now, in terms of Q&A, the best way I can manage time this evening is by taking all the Q&A at the end. But if you think you've got a really burning question, please stick your hand up virtually so you come to the top of the list so I can see you, and I will take time to answer your question. But of course, there's always the danger that I might have answered your question in the rest of the stuff I was going to say anyway. But I will leave time at the end to do that.
Can you just repeat that code, Nigel?
Certainly. Can you see it on the screen? It's M-E-N.
Oh, that one. Oh.
Yeah, the big one in big white text. So MENTI.com,
Yeah, got it.
74729579. So I'll just give you a moment to do that. We will be having a bit of fun tonight as well. We are going to have a quiz as well. And there is a first prize. And trust me, the first prize is worth winning. It is worth some money, but you can't exchange it for any other goods or services. So more on that later. As Danny said already, this is being recorded. So folks, if you need to drop off early, if I do go past 8 o'clock, I will apologise in advance. Of course, as Toastmasters, the one thing we never do is apologise. So sorry about that. But if you do have to drop off by 8, and clearly you can catch it up on the recording later. And all the slideware that I'll be sharing with you this evening, I will email to Danny and he will actually circulate it to all of you. Now, the reason that's good is because I mentioned before, this is a very interactive deck we're working with this evening. So all of your inputs, your lovely input that you're going to vote on and do polls and put some text and stuff in, that'll all be recorded in the slide deck that I'll send out to Danny. So you'll have a permanent record of everything we've gone through this evening. And for those of you familiar with Menti, you'll notice some emojis on the bottom of the screen. Click away to your heart's content. You can put little comments in and stuff like that. Anything to liven it up, make it a bit of fun. So let's rock and roll. So first and foremost, I do want people to have got to the Menti part right now, because I'll ask a very simple question next. And that is, how many of you, and you can include the short assessment that we've done over the last week or so in preparation for this course, who's heard of DISC, who's done one, who uses it regularly, who's never heard of it? So if you can just take a moment to put your input in, please, that would be really great. And I can see some of the scores coming in already. So yes, we've got a healthy component of DISC. What's that? I think you guys are going to get more out of tonight than most others. Good to see that people have done DISC profile recently. I have to say that the small inventory question set I sent out was a subset of a much bigger profile. So the bigger profile is a little bit more accurate, but I'd like to think that what I sent out and what you answered is going to be somewhere between 70 to 75% accurate on your particular styles and preferences. So we've got a healthy number of things coming in. We've got 17 responses so far. Thanks for that. So we've got no actual disc practitioners in the room, which is pretty good, because I can sort of get away and say a few things that may or may not be true, but I'm not going to do that, of course. And so that's really healthy. So we've got that. So almost half the people in the room not sure what disc is. So again, I trust you guys are going to get more out of it. Now, what I'd like to do now is just sort of share with you what I think, well, not what I think, but what we are going to do this evening, rather. But first and foremost, I just wanted to share with you, for those of you that have filled out the inventory on the Excel spreadsheet, you're looking at tab 3, the one with the graph. When I ask you in a few moments about which is your highest identifier, just take the bar that's the highest. If you've got two of the same height, choose either one. It doesn't really matter. Those are your more or your strongest characteristic. So, and I'll tell you all about what that means in a little moment. But it's you answer the questions on tab 2, and the graph result on tab 3 is the one we're looking for in just one moment. But what I really want to cover this evening is actually, I do want to go through your disc profile. So in a sense, I will be talking to each of you, because I will be talking about each of the 4 styles in a very fun way. So I'm going to take it to the extremes so you can see what it looks like when it's taken to the that uppermost level, just to bring it to life and add a bit of colour for you. And we will be going into a deeper dive across all of the factors of the different styles. So what are the greatest strengths? What are the greatest fears? What's a method of control? And what's the value that you offer, predominantly perhaps to your organisation or to your family unit? There's some really great stuff in all of this. And finally, at the end, there will be an opportunity for us to reflect, and of course, the obligatory questions and answers. So what I want to move on to now is to go to what I consider to be one of life's golden rules. I'm sure that most people have heard this already, that you treat others the way that you want to be treated. Okay, so first and foremost, my next question on Menti is going to be, treat others how you want to be treated. How many people agree with that statement? It's a simple binary yes or no. So if I could get you to dust down your iPhones or your Androids or your tablets or your iPads and just let me know what you think. So I've got about 15 responses coming in tonight. So far, we're up to 17 at the moment. I'll just give it a couple more moments. Excuse me. So we're looking at the moment like an overwhelming majority of people saying absolutely that you treat people the way that you want to be treated. So I'm standing here quite despondent at the moment, because actually you're a tough crowd, because I have to tell you, you're all wrong. And now I've got the best part of 50 minutes to explain to you why actually you don't treat people the way that you want to be treated. So those 5% actually now that agree with me probably have got an inkling of what I'm going to say over the next hour or so. But fundamentally, I just want to explain why that is not the case. So thank you everyone for answering that question, and let's go. So what I really want to reframe, what I really want the big takeaway for each and every one of you this evening is, treat others how they want to be treated. The more you move towards someone else's style and preference, the more likelihood you've got of getting what you want, being at work, life, or play. Okay, but again, for me, I would have voted with the majority previously, because I thought that was, in fact, life's golden rules. So just pausing for a moment. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, well, why do we actually want to have profiling in place? You know, why do we need it? Why, you know, people are different. We know they're different, but fundamentally, none of us walk around with labels on. You know, nobody walks around with a label on saying extrovert or outgoing or, you know, slow or whatever it might be. You know, people are different. But the one thing I'd like you to learn from this evening is that in most cases, people are predictably different. And again, I'm going to show you some styles, some tools and techniques to enable you to identify recognize and adapt your own style to get the most out of those relationships. And very often, of course, people respond to circumstances in a much different way to we do. And just going back to the question I just asked, if you do treat people the way that you want to be treated, what you're actually doing is having a planet full of people like yourself. And I think we all know through life, through education, through career and work, that actually diversity is the key to creativity and all those great things. If we were all same as everything else, we'd be like Agent Smith in The Matrix, for example, probably with no emotion or anything else, acting and behaving exactly the same. What a dull place that might be. So as I've said, what I'm hoping that you guys are going to get out of this evening is that once you start to understand DISC, you'll come to realize that in most cases, people are predictably different. And what I want you to do and to leave with is to enable you to build, maintain and enjoy much better relationships moving forward. And really for me, it's all about raising your own self-awareness about yourself, awareness rather of people around you, and of course those critical modify to manage behaviors. Now, before I do move forward, what I have to say is that fundamentally, sorry, I've just gone into that wrong slide there. Health warning on this is that, I'm not trying to put anyone in boxes. It's not a test. There's no right or wrong. And for the purpose of the deep dive today, like I mentioned before, I'm going to be talking at extreme ends of all the styles in order to highlight and paint and put some colour and picture around those certain styles and characteristics so that you can notice them more readily, both in yourself and in others around you. So let's go now and look at the 4 styles. So the first of the styles is the D styles, the commanders, because these guys are really task focused. If you look on your screen there, top left-hand corner, they're outgoing, they're task orientated. They prefer to cut to the chase, get to the point and move at a really fast pace. And success for them is all about results. And in relationships, the people side of things can often fall by the wayside at the expense of other things getting moving. Then we move over to the cheerleaders, the I's. These are the outgoing, people-focused people. And because they're people-focused, they can get very often easily distracted and often very cheery and over-optimistic. And in relationships, their task element can actually fall by the wayside at them, or rather their expense of actually having fun. And a typical thing about I's are that jobs can get started but not finished, which can cause frustration with the other styles in this matrix. So let's go for the S's. These guys are the carers. We're now moving below the line. We're going into the realm of introversion, more reflective people, slower paced people. So S's really are the guys that don't necessarily feel they need to be at the center of attention. They often seek to support others to provide stability. Now, in relationships, they may not say what's on their mind, which can be frustrating for the more outgoing types. If you take an I, people-focused extrovert, frankly, you can't get a word in because they're actually talking all the time. With an S, it's the polar opposite. These guys, sometimes it's difficult to get a word out. But the S's will try hard to avoid conflict. Very difficult subset of people to change. If you're in a business transformation in the work scenario, these are the guys you want to get on board first. But S's will seek a win-win. They're the diplomats, but they will step up if they feel vulnerable. And then we have the C's. So the C's are the critical thinkers. Again, we're on the introvert level, but this time we're task focused, not people focused. And these type of people can come across as being a little bit clinical, a bit aloof as far as people are concerned. They like to reflect and consider what they're going to say and make every effort to ensure they're correct with any of their statements made. And of course, C's can be very frustrated with people that do not match their expectations. And others will become frustrated with them, of course, because they can be a little bit picky and overcritical. Now, in a project environment where I am, of course, the C's that I work with or work for me are pretty much my grammarians or spell checkers. So these are the guys, the quality standards, they get everything right. So I just want to check in at this point and say, so far, so good. Can you just give me a raise of hands if everything's okay? Or if you like, I will take a question or two if people are a little bit confused with where I've got to right now. No? Okay. So back onto Mentimeter then. So for the folks that finished the Excel assessment, thanks so much for that. Go to tab 3, get your highest column. It's either going to be a D, I, S or C. Get ready to put that in onto the next slide. For those of you that didn't manage to do the pre-work, the homework, if you consider yourself to be an extrovert, you're either going to be a D or an I. If you're an introvert, you're going to be a C or an S. So first and foremost, just work out where you are on that continuum, extrovert, introvert, outgoing or more reflective. And then consider to yourself, am I more people focused or am I more task focused? The one thing I will say to you is just be completely honest. Don't try and be something you're not here, because the results won't mean much to you at all. So what I'm going to do now is just move on to the next slide, give folks just a chance to put in their particular styles. I did make a note from some people that had sent me some details late this afternoon. So I know the spread of what I've got from about a dozen people, which is quite good. So excellent. We've got about 14. I think we can get up to about 20, 25. So we've got even Stevens on the I's and the C's at the moment. Now the I's and the C's, interestingly, polar opposites, as are D's and S's. And I'll talk a little bit later on about how those guys get on. And actually, in your own profile, you might have two actually opposing strengths, which could be a D and an I, sorry, an I and a C, for example. And that's sometimes where you have that little bit of inner conflict. So we'll come on to that in a moment. But fundamentally, this is starting to prove a point of mine that I've often thought about Toastmasters in general, in that some of the best speakers I've seen have actually been introverts. And I think on balance, we've got more introverts. Oh, the eyes have just gone up again there. The eyes have it. Introverts, I think, do make the best speakers. You can take people like Steve Jobs, who arguably made the best sales presentation of all time back in 2007 with the original iPhone launch. But you take people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, they're all introverts fundamentally, and they're all actually task-orientated introverts. These guys are going to get us to Mars. They're going to get us into space. They run the world, through Amazon, or they did at least until the web outage today. But anyway, thank you for that. Hang on to that. We'll revisit some of these a little bit later on in the evening. And I've done my health warning too soon, because that was my health warning slide. So just to say that I can sometimes get this a little bit wrong. So I just wanted to, before I go into the detail, is just say, in summary, for the sort of things I've mentioned as part of the marketing tag I did for this particular webinar, the D's are the commanders. They're the JFDIers, the Just Do It Brigade, okay? They're all about action. They're all about speed. They're all about getting stuff done. The I's are your rah-rah cheerleaders, overly optimistic, full of fun and energy, fast-paced, big picture, colourful individuals. You've then got your S's again. It's all about we can do it, we're in this together, very, very sort of a lot of camaraderie and support, but also resistant to change and actually at times quite passive aggressive. S's sometimes will build things up within themselves, then just vent like a volcano. So don't underestimate those guys. And then you've got C's, which are the critical thinkers, which is all about quality. Let's do it right. Okay. So with that in mind, let's just start moving forward. And I think I've just covered my next summary slide here as well. But the important thing to mention on this particular slide, when you take it from task to relation, then it's all about, on the people side, the I's and the S's, it's all about feelings and emotions, okay? The task is not that important. If you remember what I said at the start of the talk, I project manager in automotive many years ago, I was very much on the task orientation, so I didn't really consider any of the people elements, which in that environment worked very well. But as soon as I moved out of automotive, I had lots of problems to deal with because I was very task focused, and I found that people didn't want to deliver or work for me because my style was not conducive to getting the best out of them. And the other thing is just there's a really great speed factor in the extroverts and the more reserved type. So the extroverts are really fast-paced, big picture, colourful. The more reserved type of people tend to want to slow things down. They want to analyse. They want to take their time to make decisions. So I'm hoping that when you start to see some of these different dimensions, you can start to spot some of the conflicts that you can see maybe at home and at work with particular people that have some of these particular traits. But what I'd like to do now is just go into a little bit more detail when my slide comes up. Oh no. Oops, gone too far. Gave the game away a little bit there. I'm not sure why that one's not coming up. But we're talking about D's now. So D's, and D's are all about drive. They're all about delegation. They're decisive and they're demanding. They're the doers and the disruptors. They're incredibly competitive. If you want to communicate with a D, it's headlines, not storylines. And you're better off coming with a solution and not a problem. Okay, so does any of that sound familiar? So I gave the game away a little bit because our first, if I get my slide deck to work. Okay, I'll do two at a time, that's no problem. So first and foremost, Donald Trump is the extreme D, okay? So I know what you're thinking. Now, very often people like Donald are characterized by ready, fire, aim, okay? So it's shoot from the hip, you know, spray and pray, catch as much stuff as you can when you shoot, ask all the questions later. Now, of course, that type of style is necessary. It's a very command and control style, very necessary, of course, when there's something like an emergency going on, like a world war, or for example, if there's a fire in a building. I mean, you're not going to sit around if there's a fire going on thinking, well, should you have a conversation about this? You know, you're going to go to action very quickly. So D's will be good at those type of things. And are there real world examples of people that could be D? Margaret Thatcher, classically. Sylvester Stallone, Robert De Niro, Tom Cruise, those alpha males from Hollywood. If you look into their backstory about how they set their goals, Arnold Schwarzenegger's another great example. You look at what those guys did to get to where they are today, and they took no compromise in doing what they were doing. And essentially, so you can talk about D's as being change agents, but I've sort of lost my thunder here a little bit, because as well as being change agents, they can of course be secret agents. And now this is more like it when you think about James Bond, you know. So if you are a D and it was your highest one, I can imagine you feeling a little bit smug right now. But you might be asking yourself, well, what has Donald Trump got in, you know, what's he got that's like James Bond? What have they got in common? So here's a few things I just want to share with you. So I'm trusting that you can think that both of them are impetuous in a way. They'll go off and do what they need to do. They are courageous. They'll go and do things and don't care about what people think. Neither of them are easily discouraged. They know their goal. They're going to go for it. Both of them excel in emergencies. Okay, so Bond always gets the baddies. Trump did whatever he did to do whatever he wanted to do, you know, almost at the root of everybody else. Both of them are rash decision makers. And for both of them, work is all consuming. So out of all of the four styles, a high D is the one that's most likely to have work-life balance issues. And with both of them, and you'll see this, you've seen it in both of these characters here, they're unlikely to apologize, okay? So you might be asking then, well, what is it that gets these guys going? Well, it's all about competition. It's all about results. It's all about getting the job done. It's about taking charge. They're motivated by power and authority. But with that in mind, if that's what drives them, what do you think their biggest fear may be? Okay, I'll just give you a moment to think about that. But their biggest fear really is failure. And you might see some of these people perhaps in your work environment the big go-getters, the last thing they want is to be seen as a failure, and they'll do whatever it takes to not be seen that way. So, you know, very often they will not admit defeat. Just take the presidential elections from last year, when the rest of the world were looking at the stats and Trump was saying, no, I've won, I've won, I've won. Almost evidence to the contrary, he still keeps his faith. And the one thing you don't want to do with a high D is take advantage of them, because you'll never forget it, or they'll never let you forget it. Having said that, I did say at the start of this webinar, treat people the way they want to be treated. So the best way to get respect with a D, if you're up for it, take them on at their own game, but within limits, because they will respect that. They will respect you coming back with their particular type and style. So if that's what they're good at in terms of, their fears, what is their real method of control? Well, as you can see from both these examples here, it's all about force of character, essentially. Though these are really, these guys are sort of, you know, the atmosphere changes when they walk into a room. You know who they are. They've got presence. It sort of, you know, goes across that space. And as I mentioned before, they are change agents. So what is their value, particularly in an organization? Well, fundamentally, very often Ds are leaders in organizations, sometimes CEOs, not all the time, but it's all about the bottom line. And it's about that courage that they bring to that organization to drag them forward. As I mentioned before, you know, wartime or emergencies, these sort of guys excel. They could also excel in things like mergers and acquisitions, where tough decisions need to get made. Okay, so I hope that's given you a bit of color at what the Ds are. And what I want to do now is move on to the first of our quiz questions. So I'm going to wait for folks to jump in. You'll get an opportunity to put your name in, or you can accept the alias that you're given. I just want to wait for a few more folks to come in. So go to the Menti code and let's get ready to roll. We've got about 18 in the room. I can tell you there is a prize this evening that I think is well worth winning. I'll tell you more about that later. Okay, we've got 20 plus in the room. That's good. We're going to go with the first question. So what you'll see, and you do need to answer on your phone, there'll be a question about the D style that I've just covered. Answer, and it is not just getting the question right, but it's getting the question right in the fastest time. So it's a bit like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So good luck, everyone. So look at your phone. So what does a D style fear? Is it offending people? Is it failure? Is it being ignored? Or is it being taken advantage of? What do we think? Excellent. Well, 2 correct answers on there. I thought I'd give you a slightly easier start. Bad luck to the couple of folks that got that question wrong, but it is all about them. It's all about how they're perceived and how they're viewed. So failure is a big no-no for them and being taken advantage of. So let's see then what that's done to the leaderboard, and let me see if I can spot any famous names on there. So I think I recognize a Claire on there, certainly recognize a Danny. And so Claire, 954, very, very close. We've got a few more questions coming up, but I'll tell you what we'll do now. Let's take a look at the eyes. So as I mentioned before, and I'm not sure why my screen's not coming up, but the eyes are the extrovert, people-orientated individuals. Now, the thing about the eyes is, well, frankly, it's all about them, isn't it? And don't they know it? The glass is always half full. And for the most part, they do have a cheery and positive disposition. They're always smiling. So what characterizes an eye, that extrovert, people-orientated individual? Well, they're impulsive, they're inspirational, they're highly interactive and interesting. They're also impressionable and imaginative, but equally can be very, very irksome and irritating for some of the other styles. These guys get all of their energy from people. Now, as I mentioned before, they can be very playful. They're looking for fun. And they, as I mentioned before, they do get easily distracted. So if you're surrounded by someone that starts lots of things and never finishes them, chances are they could be more of a high I, meaning typically they're the type that will procrastinate more than any other. They'll start loads of things and finish none of them, frankly. So if that sounds familiar, and I know there are a few eyes in the crowd this evening, let's see if that rings true. So what I want to do now is just go through a couple of examples here. So American actor Will Smith, okay, fun guy. You could have people like Graham Norton. Most game show or talk show hosts are eyes typically, because fundamentally it's more about them than it is their guests. You know, that they want to be that center of attention. Most people in show business tend to be of that persuasion. And the thing to recognize about high eyes, and I am going to the extremes with all of this, is they do have a tendency to be drama queens. So if you get certain sudden outbursts in people around you, you might be thinking, oh yeah, that's a drama queen moment. They might very likely be an eye. But interestingly, we had James Bond last time round. How about this guy, Austin Powers, international man of mystery, clearly very, very positive, very optimistic, charming, and frankly, undisciplined. So, you know, as I mentioned before, eyes are polar opposites to C's. C's are the guys that get all the detail right. Eyes typically not really an eye for detail, more for an eye for fun. Now, what I want to do, as I did with the D's, is just go through and say, okay, so what is it that fuels eyes? What is it that gets them out of bed in the morning and gives them all that energy? Well, it's all about being popular, and it's all about being fun. Okay, so for them, it's all about them. These are the guys, if they were a car, they would be something like a flash yellow Lamborghini saying, look at me, you know, wouldn't necessarily have to go fast, but just go purring down the street like that. A D, by contrast, would be something like a black V8 Range Rover, petrol, you know, big noise, go everywhere as fast as possible, you know, no point going shopping in this sort of thing. You just want to get to where you're going really, really quickly. So these guys, the eyes, like to be liked. So it's no surprise then their greatest fear is actually rejection or loss of popularity. And again, you can see that in the world of show business when people fall off their pedestal or they're no longer in the limelight. It happens with sports stars as well. For them, their greatest fear is not being liked. So these are the real people pleasers. But having said all of that, what is their value in life, either in an organization or a social context? Well, frankly, eyes are great influencers. If in a business context, you're doing a big change program and you want people to come on that journey, the eyes of the people you need to get everyone to rally and come to the fore and say, you can do this. You know, they're the real sort of optimists. They're very, very persuasive. They're very popular, as I mentioned, for the reasons of energy and fun. They tend to be likable individuals. So, you know, a bit of a secret weapon. They do, you know, all of the styles I'm talking about have some really, really niche skills and some disadvantages. And that's why a blend of all of them, frankly, for diversity is really beneficial and highly desirable in any working unit. So if that is what their method of control is, what is their value to the organization? So it is their positivity and it is their enthusiasm. Now, you could take, for example, somebody like Richard Branson, who I would say is probably a D and an I, but here's a guy that doesn't mind getting dressed up in stupid costumes, sitting on the side of planes or whatever he's doing to publicize his Virgin brand. So he's all about the fun aspect as well, but equally, he knows what he wants. And as I mentioned, they are the secret persuaders in an organization. They will get people on board, and you should leverage them in a family unit or in an organizational unit to get people moving, get them aligned and move forward. Typically speaking, if Ds were leaders, Is typically could be sort of sales type people, generally speaking, at extremes, but people that get you excited about a certain concept, product or service. So with that in mind, then I'm just going to move on to the next of our quiz questions. None of these questions are actually difficult, by the way. And I just want to go on, I'll give you just a second to get your phones unlocked, but we're going to head on to question number 2. And again, look at your phone. And so what is an eye style sometimes limited by? Is it lack of concern? Is it being impulsive, overcritical, or indecisive? What do you think? Okay, well, I'm glad my message is getting through a lot. Bad luck to the folks that got it wrong. But being impulsive, it's this almost magpie-esque, picking up something that's bright and shiny, then seeing something else and moving on to that. So again, thank you. Someone's coming with mind blown. Use the emojis, that are a bit of fun on the screen. It's all good fun. Generally speaking, some of those answers possibly correct as well, but the one big answer I was looking for that was probably more correct than the others was the fact that people there, they are impulsive rather than anything else. So great. And let's move on now then to the scoreboard and let's see how it's shaping up. Claire, are you still managing to take the lead on this one? Doesn't look like it. Stingalicious looks like he got that the fastest, but it's moved up the board. So Dragonite, which I think is an alias. We've got Simba and Sakura, podium places. There is only one winner today, by the way. You know, nobody remembers those that come second. There's no silver medals in this contest this evening, but Claire, you've slipped down to 5th there, but there's still time to catch up. I only capture the top 10 in this, so if you're not on the leaderboard at the moment, there's more than enough time to come back on. So I just want to talk about the S's now. Now, apologies for my slide, which hasn't come up. The deck will have the slide in there. So the S's are your introvert, people-focused individuals, okay? So S's are all about safety. They're all about security, okay? And I'll give you a classic example here of Princess Diana, okay? Now, that's certainly the persona I think that I saw during her lifetime, but you could have people like Nelson Mandela, you could have Mother Teresa, you could have Gandhi, you could even have David Beckham. And these are the guys that have got incredible emotional intelligence. So if emotional intelligence is something that's high up on your radar, chances are that, you know, you've got a lot of S style in your particular profile. And from a sort of a TV perspective, any of you fans of The Simpsons out there, TV show, I think it's been going for about 30 years and none of them seem to age a day. Well, Marge Simpson, you know, the one that keeps the whole family together, embodies a lot of the aspects around the S persona. They're all about harmony. They're all about being supportive. They're loyal. They're the team players. So again, in an organization, these are the guys that make sure the work gets done. But as I mentioned before, they can be also quite stubborn and resistant to change. And if you're going through a change piece, you know, either in life or even at work, these are the guys you need to get on board first. And as I mentioned before, if you've got some eyes in your team, get them to whip up the excitement to get these guys moving, because don't tell an S on a Friday afternoon that you want them to be in London on a Monday morning. They're going to want a lot more notice than that. Don't drop things on them last minute. They will not like it. So other characteristics about S's, well, they're very sensitive, they're very slow paced, and they're very patient. And out of all of the 4 styles, S's actually would make the best evaluators in Toastmasters rather, because they are the best listeners. But one of the characteristics that sort of stands out for S's is at times they can also be self-sacrificing. So they'll always choose the underdog and put people above them. Okay, so again, recognize that with people around you and make sure they've got the support themselves to make sure they don't self-sacrifice all the time. And as I've also mentioned, S's have a tendency to be stubborn, tendency to be passive aggressive, and sometimes will shut down altogether. Now, I did mention, of course, that I's are the drama queens, but S's are far more volatile. So they will go and they'll pent it all up, and sooner or later it will explode, and you'll certainly know about it. So very, very emotional. And as I mentioned before, typically with an S style, it's very difficult to get a word out. So just recognize, because they're more introvert, they're more people focused, they may not be necessarily that talkative. But again, what is their fuel? Well, I've touched on it a little bit. It's all about harmony. It's all about security. And again, if they're in a very secure situation, then if you're going to change that, you need to give them plenty of notice, because they're not going to jump up and do something the next day just because someone else thinks it's a good idea. take time to listen to them, take time to learn from them, and give them time to make that particular change. So what is their greatest fear? If their greatest fuel is harmony and security, well, their greatest fear is going to be the loss of that security. So the one thing this is what makes them really quite stubborn at the end of the day, because they don't want things to change. You know, things are as good as they are. Change brings uncertainty. Uncertainty for them is a threat. A threat means they're going to, you know, they're probably going to get even more entrenched the more that sort of change thing comes through, unless it's handled in a very decent manner. So how about their method of control? Well, actually, particularly in an organizational setting, S's are incredible for slowing things down to get it to a very reflective space. They're incredibly reliable. As we'll learn from when we've joined all of the 4 styles together, the D's will say what needs to get done. The I's will get everyone on board to say you can do it. The S's will make sure the work's done. And when we get to the C's, they're the guys that will make sure it's done correctly. So the S's are your reliable workforce. They will make sure stuff gets done. They're very repeatable, they're very dependable, and they're very predictable. Okay, so again, a really great style to have in your team or family unit. So what really is their value to the organization? Well, very often they're very good diplomats. They won't rock the boat, you know, so they'll make sure that everything's taken care of. They'll make sure they won't upset anybody, because it's difficult for these guys to overly verbalize themselves. So for example, the polar opposite, which is a D, you know, they would see them quite overbearing, so they probably may not challenge. So they would tend to be just a little bit more in the background, but equally they will stand up for looking after everybody around them. So I trust that's all made sense. Can I just have a bit of a thumbs in the air or a bit of a wave if that's all going well and everyone's still with me? Great, thank you. I'd like now to move to the next Menti question. So I'll just give you a second or two just to unlock your phones if you need to. This is question 3 of 6. Okay, so I'm going to do one about each of the 4 styles, and there's a couple of general ones. I'm just going to hit the button now to get moving on this. So question about the S style here now. So what does an S style need from others? So is it they need someone that concentrates on the task, weighs the pros and cons, prioritizes work maybe, or state unpopular decisions? Now, as I mentioned before, some of these answers are more correct than others, and I'm just really looking for the ones that really stand out. So first and foremost, yeah, concentrate on the task, but actually they do get the work done, but in a slightly different way to C's, as we'll find out. Weigh up the pros and cons. On a more lenient day, I would say yes, because they actually want people to make decisions for them time after time. But very often for an S, because they're not necessarily all that focused about the job, they want people to tell them what to do, and they want people to say what the bad news is. Okay, so again, bad luck to those that got that slightly wrong, and good favour to those that did. Let's see how it affects our leaderboard right now. So we could have Simon or Teresa making a play up the board here, but Stingalicious is still there, hanging on very close. And I can tell you that possibly with the last 2 questions, those that need to make up a lot of ground possibly will. Okay, but we've still got Simba in there. Claire, you're dropping down the board here. I'm not sure what's happening. I should have given you the answers up front, but never mind. What I want to do now is move on to the C style. And again, apologies that there are no visuals for this, but I've touched on some of this already. But C's, they're all about accuracy. They're both your quality control and your quality assurance, particularly in a business context. They'll make sure the work is done properly. And for them, doing things right is the order of the day. So they're all about efficiency. But C's can also be very cautious, but they're incredibly competent, they're consistent, compliant, and even calculating. And very often C's will go by the book. And in extreme cases, they will suffer from paralysis from analysis. So they'll overdo everything again because they're on the introvert scale, more reflective, lot slower pace. They will take time to make decisions and choices. So, for example, when I went back to the car scenario, so the D's are your Range Rovers, the I's are your Lamborghinis, your S's are your people carriers. It's get everyone on board. Got to have NCAP 5-star rating, got to have seatbelts everywhere, got to be safe and secure in a unit. The C-style car would be something similar, probably something like a Volvo, you know, but the reason they bought a Volvo is because, do you know what, it does 57.6 miles to the gallon, only if you have your tyre pressures at 35 psi and you don't drive faster than 56 mile an hour. These guys are really calculating, know what they want, okay? And I can tell you that if you're in the C camp as your master score, you're in some really great company, because we've got guys like Steve Jobs. We've got guys like Bill Gates. I've mentioned Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, but actually people like Stephen Hawking and even Einstein was a very high C. So, you know, almost genius prone in a way. And that comes back to the fact that if you are focused on the task and you're taking your time, the way you come across to other people is you can be a little bit cold, a little bit aloof. So again, just be wary of that. But even, again, from the world of fiction, how about this guy, Sherlock Holmes? Classic C, you know, as I mentioned, very talented, perfectionist. All these guys are perfectionists. If any of you guys have watched that film about Steve Jobs, when he got sacked from Apple the first time round, he went off and produced a cube computer. I think it was for the Next Corporation. And he did a perfect cube. And when he looked at it in isometric view, which is at an angle, it didn't look quite right. So what he did, he actually made it not to be a cube. So visually, it looked like a cube, but only a C would do that. These are the only guys that would go from good to great, and only C's would notice this style of perfectionism. But of course, we all know as Toastmasters that perfectionism, of course, does not exist. So in a similar way with what I've done with the other styles, their greatest fuel, it's all about accuracy, it's all about detail, it's all about quality. Accuracy in getting things right is the order of the day. And one thing I will say, for high C's, they will choose being right over being happy. Okay, I'll say that again. They will choose right over being happy. So if you're surrounded by some grumpy people that like getting things right, these could be your C contingent. You know, they're very organized, they're very, very analytical, quality and precision. So I guess you start to see now, if you take that to the polar opposite, which is the I's, the fun guys, the big picture, fast moving, start lots of things, not finish them. For the C's, that's a no-no. And that's why for C's, you know, that when they start seeing people doing that type of thing, it's like, oh, they don't care, they don't know what's going on, they don't understand. And you start to get some of these conflict situations. So if that's what fuels a C, what are they really afraid of? Well, it may come as no surprise, but frankly, they don't like to be criticized because they're heading for this perfectionist plane. So if you are going to criticize them, you better come armed with a lot of evidence, because they will like that. They will respect you if you bring evidence to suggest you've got this wrong because of X, Y, and Z. Don't just say that's not good enough, because they will want some proof as to why you disagree with them in the first instance. And the other thing that C's typically will try and avoid is conflict. Again, we're on that introvert spectrum. We're on the task focus, so not people related. So more often than not, they don't necessarily harbor all of those interrelational skills. They will try and avoid that typically. And we'll come on to some of the conflict mechanisms of all the 4 styles in just a moment. So that's their greatest fear. So what is it that gives them their method of control? Well, their method of control is, as you might imagine, it's all about going by the book. It's about, you know, following the rules. And I suppose you can start to recognize, you know, we're talking about scientists, we're talking about, you know, quality control. We're talking probably about institutions like the police force or the army, something like that, in a sense, process and procedure. And one thing I haven't touched on yet, but C's in particular and S's to a large extent will prefer written communication over verbal. The D's and the I's will rather talk it out and actually don't want to make notes, because it's like, for them, it's just wasting time. They want to get off and do something else. But for the quality orientated C's, they need things written down. They need to know what they're doing. Just to give you a very quick example of this, if you've got a high D saying to a high C, I want this report done, C might say to the D, that's fine, tell me what you want and when you've done it by. And the D might often go, well, you know what I want, and I want it done as soon as possible. Now, for a C, that is no answer at all, because frankly, as soon as possible is not specific enough, because for the D, as soon as possible is this afternoon, but to a C, it could be a week on Tuesday. And the very fact they haven't said what they want will infuriate a C, because they don't know what they're going to be measured on. They don't know what should go in. The last thing they want to do is put something forward only for it to be rejected, because, of course, they don't like criticism, of course, and they don't like the conflict piece about having to go back. So if you look at the dynamic on the task side between the D's and the C's, the D is saying, do it now. The C is saying, do it right. And then the D is saying, do it again. And you can get into this circle, this vicious circle of things which just spiral out of control. So again, just something to be mindful of. I'm sort of hoping that for everyone in the audience tonight, you're starting to see some patterns and some examples, you know, through life and career where these sort of scenarios may have been played out. But with all that in mind, particularly from an organizational context, what value do these guys bring? Well, again, it's all about doing things right. And very often in the world of work, it's all about regulation. It's all about legislation. It's all about making sure you do things right. So you do need them in your organization. There is a need for people to do detail. And the big takeaways from the D's and the I's in the room tonight, the high D's and I's, is there's a need for the detail people to be given time and space to do the work that they need to do. Don't assume they can work at your pace to get the right results, because more often than not, they'll get a different result to you and possibly a better result. Now, before I move on to the next quiz question all around C's, I just want to say, by the way, that I said at the start with a health warning that none of this defines any of us. And actually, all of us are capable of being in each of these four zones at any one particular time. The only caveat really is if you're a high D, it'll be more of a task and a struggle for you to become a high S or a high I or a high C than it is for other styles. And of course, as we'll come on to talk about in a short while, environment plays a part as well to all of this. So you could be a different person at home than you are at work because of the various styles that are at play. But just to say, I'm not pigeonholing anybody. I'm not putting you in a box. We're all capable of doing all of these styles. We choose not to do some of them, and some of them are, for the most part, are a bit of a stretch for us to do. But there's times and occasions, of course, where we need to do that. So just moving on to our next quiz question, number 4 of 6. Just give you a moment to unlock your phones or wind up your iPad or whatever else, and let's see how we get on with a question about C's. Okay, so what does a C style prioritize? Don't forget, its fastest finger gets the most points on this. So do they give support? Do they accept a challenge? Is it about accuracy, or is it about taking action? What do you think is the best answer here? Excellent. Well done. 100%. Wonderful. I think my message is getting through. So thank you so much for that. Let's see how. Oh, no, we don't have a leaderboard. We don't have a leaderboard. As I've just touched on, actually, I was probably jumping ahead of myself a little bit. Treat all of these disc styles as a blend, because none of us is exclusively a high D, a high S, a high I, or a high C. We're a blend. And so just imagine it like a cup of coffee. Sometimes you might want to take your coffee black. That's your high D. But sometimes you soften it with some sugar. make you a little bit more S, a little bit more reflective, a little bit more people orientated. Then if you have a dash of milk, you might get a bit more energy, again up that people spectrum, just to be a little bit more fun. So none of these, as I said before, are fixed. It all depends on a lot of things, and very often we are a blend of all of these, and at times that can lead to inner conflict as well, because of course, you know, if you're an I and a C, for example, of equal magnitude, there's one part of you saying, no, I've got to do this properly, right, it's going to take time. And the other side of you saying, well, it's nice and sunny outside, I want to go and walk the dog or wash the car or go and have a beer or whatever it might be. And you sometimes have that level of inner conflict. So let's see what we have next. So I did talk, didn't I, before, about what happens when you get a clash of styles. And like most things in life, when you get the polar opposites, that's where you get the biggest variation in behavior. So C's, particularly by I's, would be seen as calculating and condescending, because mentioned that C's have to be right. They'd rather be right rather than being happy. While to an I that always wants to be happy, they're just seen as basically grumpy. But of course, on the other side of the fence, to a C, a high I, is incredibly impulsive and frankly irritating. And I guess, you know, you can start to see some of those caricatures play out in some of the examples you've seen through your life. And very often with high I's, you know, if you're a C or an S in particular, you really want to get them to cut to the chase, you know, because they like talking and like talking about themselves, high I's. So, you know, a C would want to cut to the chase if they were brave enough to speak up and say, just tell me what happened at the end. I don't need to hear all the detail. Just get me to the end, because it's just going on too far. And in a similar fashion, D's will think that S's are just far too slow and too steady. And frankly, you know, at the end of the day, that they're just not pulling the weight. You know, they'll judge them by their own values, and, you know, clearly being more of an introvert nature, a bit more slow, a bit more reflective, clearly don't have the energy and the action focus of a D. But equally, S's will see D's as too domineering and too demanding on occasion. And as I said before, you know, with these types, going back to that very original question, treat others how they want to be treated. So if a D is being quite blunt with you, be blunt back, because they will respect that. And, you know, very often they will recognize that, okay, yeah, that, you know, meet them on equal terms without being overly aggressive. And that can work wonders. Equally with an I, you know, start to be a bit more fun, you know, just, you know, if you're caught up in the detail because you're high C, you know, just chill, breathe out a bit, and breathe in rather, and then just sort of relax into it a little bit and just have a bit of fun for a bit of while. And you can start to bring that person with you, because at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is gaining rapport. And the key thing you get when you get rapport is trust. And when you get trust, you get much, much better working relationships. I mentioned at the start of the call about my style, which is very task orientated. You know, people didn't trust me because I wasn't moving to them closely enough, frankly, and that therefore I needed to bridge that gap. I needed a vehicle and a tool to understand those people better, and, you know, tools like DISC and Myers-Briggs really helped me to try and understand that. And as I mentioned to you, I mean, Zoom is a great example, really. I mean, not for us Toastmasters, because of course we play all these roles quite nicely, but if you're on Zoom calls, maybe for pleasure or for work, very often the C's and the S's will be the guys that come onto your Zoom call either on time or maybe a few minutes late. And the reason is they don't want to be on camera, they don't want to be on audio, they want to be in the shadows rather than the spotlight. Your D's and your I's will do all the talking at the start. They'll be out there waving their arms around and doing all of these things. And indeed, you know, when you're back into person-to-person environments, you walk into a room, your D's and your I's, you'll spot them a mile away. These are the guys that will be animated. These are the guys that will be talking. These are the guys that will be smiling. They'll be in groups. Your S's and your C's will probably tend to be arms crossed, maybe in the corner, you know, maybe looking at the phone, these type of things. And, you know, and I'm making a lot of generalizations here, but clearly the best way to find out, of course, is to do a profile, but fundamentally beyond that, just to ask questions, you know, ask people about their style traits or characteristics. You know, do they like fast-paced work? Are they fun and adventure? You can get a lot of information just by asking general questions. You can get a feeling and a sense for their style of work, and some are more obvious than others, of course. And as I mentioned before, particularly with S's, these are the contingent that you really do need to give a lot of notice for any particular change. Don't make it last minute. They will not react well to that. But your eyes will probably react pretty well because it's like something new. You know, put that down, go over here and play with this. You know, so you know, it is about the different styles that that you work with. So, and again, just one thing actually I picked up from LinkedIn this morning. Actually, it was about Richard Branson, who I mentioned earlier, and it was a question. I think people ask him. He answers a question a month or something like that on his LinkedIn messaging page. And he said one of the questions that he was asked was, what would he say to his 10-year-old self? And what he said was, I would remind my 10-year-old self that people are always more important than grades. The way you treat people and trust people will prove to be far more valuable than algebra. And that's pretty much speaks to me from my sort of task to relationship type focus in a way. So that I hope has managed to resonate with a few of you. And let's just moving on at question 5 of 6. Let's see how we get on with this one. So this one, I might have given too much away, but what do you think my high level disc style might be? Am I a D, an I, an S, or a C, do you think? Very interesting. Very interesting. Thanks for everyone that's answered that particular question. I am actually a very high C. I am, as I often describe myself in my own Toastmasters club, a recovering perfectionist. You know, I've seen the sins of what it's like on the dark side of just being completely task focused. And actually Toastmasters has been a phenomenal vehicle for me to become far more sociable. One of my goals, once I'd learned a lot about DISC, was to become far more I. And in, you know, and through our journey through pathways in Toastmasters, become more verbal, we become a lot better at making relationships, generating rapport, and gaining that all-important trust. So that question may have been a bit of a game changer for those of you still in the contest. So let's see where we go. We're about 10 minutes from the end, by the way. So if you need to nip off, I know this is being recorded. It looks like it could still be at the top. Oh. So not much in it. And the last question, by the way, when we get there, will catch a few of you out. So please think about it carefully. Bit of a gap to third place, but still, frankly, I think any of the top 4 could potentially get this. I think for most others, it's game over. But I'll tell you about the great prize when I get to it in just a moment. So what have we got coming up next? Right, so here is the decider then. So this one's a little bit cryptic, and just think about it before you make your answer. And in fact, if somebody gets this right, I might ask them to unmute and explain why it's the correct answer. So here we go. So 5 frogs are sitting on a log. 4 decide to jump off. How many are left? Okay. Excellent. Well, I'm so pleased that someone has got that right. Could I just offer up for someone who got that question correct? Could you just want to unmute and explain to everyone why that's the correct answer?
Because they only decided to do it. They didn't actually do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the one thing that is the difference between doing something and not doing something is not deciding, it's actually action. And you know, I think in life we can only control 2 things fundamentally. I know we think we can control more than that, but it's attitude and action is the only 2 things that we can control. And that was a big lesson for me during lockdown, really, when I reflected that it's all about control the controllables. So yeah, deciding to do something is not actually doing it. So the 5 of them are still on there. So well done, Claire. Whether that's going to get you to P1, I do not know, but let's see, I guess, how it all pans out at the end now. So okay, so wow, by the smallest of margins, Sandvika, you are the winner. Do you want to make yourself known and unmute and just give us a wave and say hi? And I'll tell you what your prize is.
Yes, it's me.
Well done, well done.
That's my Easy Speak ID, by the way, so you can actually verify it.
Okay, and what club are you from, Nikita?
I'm at Elbert Speakers in Durham.
Okay, well done on winning that. And your prize is actually a full disc profile. So if you can send me a private message in chat with your email address, then I'll reach out to you separately, and we'll go through a much deeper analysis of your full disc profile. I'll just explain exactly what a full disc profile is. So tonight we've just had a really rough snapshot on pretty much, I would suggest, your public mask, which is the one that you typically would exhibit in a work scenario. Okay, well, what the full disc profile does, and frankly it's only with 27 questions, so not a massive amount more, it will actually give you 3 graphs which will show you the person you are at work, the person you are at home, and the person you are under pressure. Okay, now if you had 3 graphs which were exactly the same, then you would be one of the most genuine, one of the most authentic people around, because you do not deviate your style in any given circumstance. But for the vast majority of most of us, we're all different, and we have to, as you can see from the graphs on the screen here, these aren't a representation, by the way, of anyone on this call, but you can see that this individual here in a work context is much less action orientated than he is under stress, or she's under stress, for example, because the D score is lower. But for them, under pressure and stress, it's all about getting stuff done. And fundamentally, in the work scenario, you know, there's less regard for detail, so their C is quite low. It's still quite low at home, but actually at work they're a bit less of it. But actually, the constant thing through all of this, they're quite a high I, so pretty genuine as an individual across all of those. So Nikita, well done for winning. What we'll do is, what I say, we'll go through your profile. It literally takes 10 minutes to complete. You can do it in your own time, and then we can have an hour's debrief about what it all means, but we'll go into a little bit more detail than we've managed to do today. And what I would also say, for those of you on there that have done your short profile on the Excel spreadsheet, if you wanted me to spend a little bit of time with you to just go through what that might suggest, then please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to put half an hour aside and just chat through what it might mean. Okay, no charge, no fees. We're all Toastmasters. We all want to learn about our self-awareness and the awareness of those around us. So if you have got an interest in doing that, then please reach out. So moving forward, this is a bit of a fun question at this point. So if you've still got your phones or your tablets or your browsers open, this is not a quiz question, by the way. Just put in what you feel. I know you don't often get a choice whether it's Mac or Windows or Android or Apple, but generally speaking, there is a bit of a correlation between what devices you prefer. We've got a few unknowns, I think, because maybe people joined a little bit late. But what I was expecting to see was blue and pink, I think it is, on the Android, because Android is a little bit more analytical focused. It's a bit more straight and upright, if you like, whereas Apple products are a little bit more fun. So I expected to see more I's and S's. Well, I've got a healthy contingent of S's and I's on the Apple side. It isn't really that scientific. I have had different results to that, but that was just a little bit of fun right there. And just to summarize, I'm just conscious I've probably gone over by 5 minutes or so. I trust you found it really useful this evening. I just wanted to summarize the styles. So we talked about introversion, we talked about extroversion, we talked about task focus, we talked about people focus. And if you're on that quadrant, which is extrovert task, You are a D. You are a commander. It's all about getting the job done. Okay. And as I mentioned before, these are the guys that pretty much set the compass direction. Typically leaders in an organization, not always, but they will set that true north. If you're an extrovert on the people side of things, you're that rah-rah cheerleader. You're the one that people come to get cheered up. You know, your motto is, you can do this, you've got this, you know. But they are these impulsive people that look for fun, big picture, big color, not necessarily detail orientated. Very good orators, good speakers, like to talk about themselves. And as I mentioned before, can have a tendency to be drama queens. Then we move down into the introvert spectrum, and on the people side, we have the S's, the carers. These are the people that look after everybody else. As I mentioned before, they can be self-sacrificing and stubborn. You know, they want to slow things down a little bit, sometimes a little bit resistance to change. But these are the guys that get stuff done. And then finally, we have your introvert, task-orientated individuals. These are the guys that will get the job done right. And a combination of each of these 4 styles, either within yourself or within your team, is a great combination to have, because as I mentioned before, diversity is highly desirable in team dynamics, because a team of Ds frankly wouldn't get very far at all, and they'd probably end up arguing, and if particularly taking advantage of each other, it would just turn into a complete fight. A team of Is would probably just sort of talk about nothing all the time. They wouldn't be very decisive in anything in particular, and the more introvert styles probably wouldn't take any decision. So you do need an iota of one of those styles in each team dynamic to sort of really make the difference there. I trust that's really all made sense. My objective, as I mentioned to you at the start of this, was really to sort of, you know, say that what I'm sharing with you tonight is all about raising your own self-awareness, maybe about characteristics, styles and preferences that you see in yourself, but also the styles and preferences you might see in other people, or at least give you some indicators as to why people behave and act the way they do. And the third thing that I hope you're going to take away with you this evening is what I call modify to manage. What are those things that you can do subtly to move towards that other person, to get that relationship, to get that connection, to get that rapport, which fundamentally leads to trust, which really is the fundamental backbone of great relationships and getting stuff done. So I'm trusting that that's the takeaway that you've had. And I'm not going to run the question poll from before, but again, if there's only one thing you learn from anything I've said this evening, you know, treat others the way they want to be treated. And in my own experience, I think you'll get a far better outcome in terms of, you know, what you want and what that other person wants as well. But as I did say, there are occasions where a JFDI approach is absolutely necessary. But in today's modern world, very often working with people rather than against them is the way to do it. And frankly, at the end of all of this, I think what I've tried to do here is give you a bridge really to say, if you want to bring peace and a bit more harmony to your relationships, wherever they may be, you might find that the language of DISC can really help. It's not more about changing who you are. Moreover, as I mentioned, it's about modifying your approach and managing your relationships to those around you who may have different preferences. And again, one of the takeaways I'd like to leave you with is, yes, that people are different, but actually they're predictably different. And I hope I've given you, you know, a palette of things to look at and to examine, is to see the reasons why that might be. And the mechanisms you might have to do in terms of modifying your approach could be as simple as speeding up or slowing down. It could be more focusing on facts and logic, or it could be just being a bit more playful and having a bit more fun. So DISC really can help you build this relationship bridge. And then you can choose to walk across it. You can choose to walk halfway, or however far you want to go. But as I say, what I'm trusting is you're armed now with a few more tools and techniques to at least understand a little bit more about yourself, other people, and how you can get closer to them. And so that actually wraps up the more formal part. But what I do like to do in these sessions is just do a little bit of reflective practice. Again, it's on Mentimeter, and I'd just like you to take a moment or two just to share through your phones or your devices. Again, all this output, by the way, will be captured and packaged in a neat PDF, which I'll get distributed to you after the event. So it'll capture all the learnings that you've had throughout this evening. We just want to share through your device now about, perhaps one thing you're going to stop doing, or maybe one thing you're going to start doing, or maybe something you're going to continue doing, or perhaps do differently. So there's always a pregnant pause with this, because I know it's all fingers and thumbs on the keypad as it comes in. But you got some stuff coming in now. Be more fun, show more courage. Also try to identify different profiles. Absolutely. Speed up. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So I'll just give it a moment or two for a few others to come in. Consider the impact I've been on others. Yeah. Sometimes we just don't know it, because the one thing I haven't talked about this evening is that we all walk around with this facade, which is frankly called ego. And we are the only person that see ego. Everybody else sees straight through it. So, if you're able to disarm yourself, I think Nancy Klein no, it wasn't Nancy Klein. It was a Brené Brown in one of her books. She talks about removing that shield of armor and being more vulnerable. And I think that's a really great technique to do. So just going across here, we've got be more patient with my eye colleague. Yeah, absolutely. And raise my energy levels to match theirs. Be more conscious with my own communication. When talking to potential clients, stop going into too much details for non-Cs. Absolutely. Be more fun and decisive. Excellent. There's some really great themes coming through here. That page will be open, so you can still answer those questions. But what I'll do is probably stop sharing my screen. In fact, the final slide on this, I won't show it because I just want to share all the good stuff that's coming in. But if anyone did want to reach out, it's got my email address and phone number on if anybody wants to reach out to me. And as I mentioned, what I will do, if anyone wants a quick debrief on their short profile, I'm more than happy to have a conversation on that. But I'm going to stop sharing, Danny, and hand back to yourself. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Nigel, for that. There's an awful lot to think about there. As I was aware, to be honest with you at the beginning, that, and it was also interesting to what you said about treat others as they want to be treated, because I've always been of the other opinion,
Me too.
To a certain extent, you can understand where you're coming from on that one, because maybe treat people as they would treat me is perhaps a little bit selfish. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's something to think about, but an awful lot to think about there. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
If people, want to stay on for a little while and ask some questions, there was only, let me just have a look in the chat. Something, hang on a minute, where is it? Jessica, are you still on the line?
Yes.
Because you had a comment that was interesting. Do you want to say it? Do you want to share it?
Yeah. I just wonder, I don't want to be a D, like you put a picture of Trump there, right? Like nobody wants to be a D, and I am. And so if as I mature as a woman and I get closer to being more drama queenish, more people oriented, how much do I focus my self-development on getting towards people oriented, or are there 10 steps I could do to get closer to that?
Well, it's a really interesting question, that, because if you recall, Jess, my path was from a C to an I, and I'm not an I, by the way, but I just exhibit the traits of an I because I know that's what the connection is to get on with people. So I started trying to be a little bit more fun, which is hard for a C because I always want to be right. If I get 96% in an exam, I don't worry about the 96% I got right. I worry about the 4% I got wrong because I think I've been judged. It's really hard. It's really hard. As I said, I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I'm away from that now. but it's do what the eyes do and sort of embrace it and go with it, and you know, just relax and chill a bit. I mean, lockdown has been phenomenal for this. And I've got to say, by the way, that even though I've been in Toastmasters 2.5 years and I've only been on Zoom a year, if just before lockdown last year I came onto a Zoom call, I would have been that guy with the camera off on mute. But Toastmasters has forced me to be front and center. It's forced me to look down the camera. It's forced me to do a lot of things. So Toastmasters actually has taken me on a big journey to becoming more people focused. And I think I made a comment earlier in the piece about, in my experience, now I know a lot more about DISC. The majority of Toastmasters I've come across, they've all been introverts, because introverts will think about what they want to do and they want to get it right. Whereas very often some more extrovert styles might be more entertaining, but they might be a little bit more undisciplined or might say the wrong thing or whatever. So I would say just focus on what you know. What I often say is think about someone that has what you want. You know, there might be a fictional figure, there might be a real person, it might be a person that you know, and use them as a role model to see how they do what they do. And if you get a chance to speak to them, just talk to them, ask them questions. You know, and my journey from C to I has been, I can measure it in years, frankly, because it's not something that happens overnight. But for me, it was letting go of where I was before, because until you do that, you can't start to move elsewhere. And it's a bit like the question that Claire answered before. Just thinking or deciding you're going to do something is not enough, really. You've got to make those positive steps. So I trust that's helped with the answer a little bit. I think it's going to be different for everyone, but I trust that's got a bit closer for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.